need a haircut. Okay, let's pause here for a second, because after I recorded this and while I was editing this, I realized that this is somewhat grim what I'm gonna tell here. So don't let that get you down, because all I'm trying to do here is completely honest with you and point out the difficulties that you will experience when you're trying to learn a new language. And I guess the whole point I'm trying to make here is don't allow yourself to get frustrated easily. Just keep your goal in mind, learning a new programming language, which can be daunting at times, but will be super rewarding as well. So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's go on. So before we start wrangling around in Vex and in Houdini, I thought it'd be good to give you a word of warning. This is probably the most requested topic since we started in Tagma. And rightfully so, because Vex is incredibly powerful and it opens up all kinds of doors in Houdini. For example, Vex is your way out when you can't find a solution using built-in nodes, or frankly, when you don't know the built-in nodes. So you can script your way around most traps and most pits. Here's a word of warning. I witnessed this with a few students and interns that I taught Vex to. The expectations, both for the student and for me, were way too big. We were way too ambitious. And it turns out learning a new language and learning the basics of programming just takes time. Usually it's a matter of months and years, not days and weeks. So don't get frustrated too quickly. This is a big project. And let's face it, programming might not be for everyone. While it is perfectly possible for anyone to understand the basic concepts of what programming means, getting good at programming requires a certain level of analytical problem-solving thinking. And developing those skills might take time. Lots of time. So it helps if you have a knack for logic puzzles like Sudokus or math or, in general, abstract problem solving. And it helps even more if you already tried to program or if you have some really basic experience programming. However, in this course, I'll assume that you have no programming experience whatsoever. And I will try to keep the lessons short and compact. I'm not a fan of clutter. It helps if you try to thoroughly understand the concept. So if there's anything unclear, either rewatch the tutorial, rebuild the setup that we built, or just plainly ask in the comments. I will orient this course somewhat on other programming courses that are out there. For example, the basics of JavaScript or Python, or the neat introduction that Daniel Schiffman did to processing. And also, if you're looking for additional Vex resources, I can hugely recommend Matt Estella's awesome CG wiki and Juraj Tomorrow's tutorial kit, and I'll link both of these resources in the description. Okay, so let's talk about what programming is on a really abstract level. Programming means giving instructions. In our case, instructions to a machine, to our computer. These commands can be very granular, like on an atomic level. For example, go to this memory location and read the values stored there. Or they can be rather intricate on a higher level, like generate a random position on a sphere. And you could compare those commands to instructions when cooking. Usually recipes give these instructions on a level like preheat oven and bake cake for half an hour at 180 degrees Celsius. However, this very same command could also be broken down more finely, so it'd be a whole sequence of commands. For example, switch on oven, wait for the oven to reach 180 degrees Celsius, put cake into oven, wait half an hour, take cake out of the oven. And we could even escalate further and break down these individual commands in commands again on a very atomic level. For example, the command switch on oven would become something like turn your head towards the oven, move closer to the oven until you can reach the knobs and dials, grab the main dial, turn the main dial until it is on the on position, release the main dial, grab the temperature dial, turn the temperature dial until it reaches 180 degrees Celsius, and release the temperature dial. And we could go on and increase the granularity and the detail of these instructions until we reach a level where, for example, we tell individual neurons in our body when and where to fire. And the very first programming languages to appear operated on a similarly low level, telling a computer how and where to look up values in a memory or how and where to write them into memory, how to add those values, how to multiply those values, etc., etc. A typical example of such a low-level language would be assembly. However, luckily the language we'll be using here, Vex, is a rather high-level language, which means it abstracted away all these intricate and minute commands. Usually we don't have to take care about allocating or accessing memory. The commands we'll be using will be more akin in complexity to what we had in our cooking recipe, bake for half an hour at 180 degrees. And while we talk about the history of programming and programming languages, let's look at Vex and its relatives. So Vex has many similarities to quite a few other programming languages. That is because Vex to a certain degree is a C-style language. That means it's heavily influenced by another programming language called C. And C was invented in the early 70s by two bearded hipsters called Dennis Ritchie and Ken Thompson at Bell Labs. And its main advantage was that it was really geared and very useful for building operating systems, which was a huge deal back then. C stayed with us, and it influenced lots of other programming languages such as C++, C#, Python, Arduino, processing, or Vex, Java, JavaScript, and PHP too, by the way. Let me pause here and mention that while these languages are syntactically very similar, their feature set hugely differs from VEX. The main difference being that they support object orientation, which VEX currently doesn't. And if you don't know what that means yet, don't worry about it. And this is a good thing. You can use the stuff you'll be learning here when trying out other languages, or you can use course material or learning material for other languages and try to make sense of it in VEX. However, VEX also has some unique features that we'll be talking about that are not available in other languages. And also, the way we'll be using VEX inside of Houdini will dictate certain techniques or approaches. These courses will focus on two things. On the one hand, teaching you the basics of programming, and on the other hand, teaching you the basics and the intricacies of VEX. What sets VEX apart? What makes it different to use? And especially, how do we use it inside of Houdini? The goal here is that we will be using VEX to actually learn programming, so that you don't have to go through a transitional phase, as would be the case when you come from another programming language. So again, word of warning, don't get frustrated too easily. This is a long process and it takes a while to grasp some of these concepts. And also keep in mind that we're doing two things simultaneously here. We're learning how to program and we're learning VEX.